So we had a collaborative talk at LiipTalk some weeks ago, and there's a groundswell pushing towards more team autonomy and responsibility, but within these discussions there are many unanswered questions as of now. We know how to prepare projects and to find technical solutions, but for social solutions like deciding on a meal or on salaries or many different things, we have actually no tool, and we haven't really decided how we want to do that. So the idea of this talk is to present how Debian takes decisions, and we'll hopefully give an insight on that. Okay, so the question is how we do take decisions. There are some decisions we have to take at a strategy level that are basically for a whole company or for a whole office or for more than basically 2-3 people. There are other decisions that we take day to day, which is projects, leads, etc. There are more micro decisions. But the way we take decisions is actually important, because without deciding how we do take decisions, we don't actually know how to proceed. So much about? Yeah, just read the slides. And this next thing is okay. I can also speak lower. So why did I take Debian as an example? First, because I know it, of course. But Debian is not only an operating system; it's also an organization. We're around 1,000 developers around the world that are registered, and there are many others that have book reporters, translators, and many people that are helping the project, but that are not yet recognized as official developers. But we can reasonably say that 1,000 people around the world have actually a decision power in the Debian project. It's spread across the Occidental world. We have basically no one in Africa, but we're everywhere in the world, and the difference between Liip and Debian, of course, but it's also the difference between Debian and other large free software organizations is that we have 0 employees. Debian is not an official organization in legal terms. It exists legally through various organizations in various countries, but as an organization, an international organization, doesn't exist. So I'll cover why. Basically, Debian's values are empowerment, responsibility, and recognition through work, not identity or role. That's maybe rings a bell for what happens in Liip too. Yeah, we'll see why. Basically, one of the things that are important in Debian is this: just do it. We don't know yet if Nike used it before us, but there was a saying, Sam Hussein, who used to be a project leader.
The thing is that Sam is to sleep. Let's just just be close to them. I don't know. So Sam, during a 2007 presentation, said, "Be bold and honest. What can't you undo?" In the context of versioning systems, and when you're working on technical things, there are many things that you can undo. Basically everything, besides when you lose files, etc., etc. But basically, the idea of that is also, don't ask if you can do things. Just do things and see how people react, and don't try to avoid too much administrative discussions and trying to get to an agreement before the people that are supposed to actually do the work will end up doing the work. That also rings a bell for the Python hackers, where in the Python book there is this easier to ask for forgiveness than permission, and that's also the idea behind that in Debian. So the plan for this presentation now, after this context introduction, is to have an overview of the constitution of Debian, to provide you an overview of the decision-making bodies that we have, and the actual decision-making procedures that we also have. So the Debian constitution is a quite long document that was initially decided upon in 1998, I think, and has seen 4 or 5 revisions since then. That's the introduction. it doesn't say what we are doing. It doesn't say this is how packages are supposed to be done. It doesn't say how we are supposed to communicate, but it's a foundation document that encodes how we take decisions and how the power circulates in the project. But it doesn't say that we are a project for doing free software. It could be the same constitution for any other body, number of people. So it describes the organizational structure for formal decision-making in the project and doesn't describe the goals of the project or how we achieve them. It was in 1998, and we last updated this summer. Of course, every update implies a lots of discussion because it's one foundation document, so it's very important that we get it right. So every time we had to update it, and the first update, the first creation of that document took several weeks of intense discussion on mailing lists, but that's how things are. The general principles in the Debian constitution is that there are two basic levels of decision making. One is as individuals, and the other one is collective, like everyone. Every developer constitutes this collective decision making body, otherwise it's individuals. And we have 4 other decision making bodies that have also their procedures and how they are made, etc. So the Constitution says that you can make any technical or non-technical decision with regard to your own work. That means that you don't have to ask for anything. That brings you a lot of power, of course, but also a lot of responsibility. Now with versioning systems, basically you can always know what was done by whom and when. But this is really the idea that we don't want to have a concept phase that is too long before the 2 people that will actually do the work in the end can actually do it. It also describes how we delegate power. So all developers together can delegate power to the project leader that we elect for 1 year, every year. And then this project leader, that is one person, can delegate his power. Basically, he gets all the power that is not taken otherwise by developers and then delegates part of this power to different teams. Initially, there were no teams, but now the delegations are long-running. So, for example, one delegation is for the Debian account manager to decide who is a Debian developer. But this delegation of power means that it's an explicit transfer of power from the project leader to this team. And that means that the project leader can also remove these power from this team at any time. Never happens, but the delegations, for example, are updated when people enter or leave the teams, etc. And it provides a way to make sure that the power circulates nicely. Some project leaders also have, at the last day of their term, changed some teams because they wanted to impose some rapid changes. But basically, that's why we elect a project leader, and they come with a program, etc. So basically, you elect someone, and you then, as in all elections, you want to see what happens. The project leader, which is one quite important position in the project, amongst other things, I left out many small details of the constitution for the sake of the arguments, but basically, he can appoint delegates, lend authority, make any decision which require urgent action, and make any decision for whom no one else has responsibility. Quite important that this might happen because otherwise, like everyone says, that's not my problem, that's not my problem, that's not my problem, and the project is stuck waiting for someone to actually do it. So there had to be someone, and this someone is the project leader in our constitution. Another important role is the secretary. Basically, the secretary is the guardian of the constitution. His role is to make sure that the constitution is followed. He will adjudicate any disputes about the interpretation of the constitution and will take votes. So nowadays he doesn't take them manually, but it's his responsibility to take care of the systems that take the votes, etc. Basically a guardian of the constitution. We have the technical committee, which decide on any matter of technical policy. Doesn't happen often, but it's one of its powers. Also decides where developers' jurisdictions overlap. So, as we said before, it's your own responsibility, you can just do it. But if your responsibility hits another developer responsibility, then either you can do it and see if the other agrees, and if you disagree, then you can appeal to the technical committee who will decide who is entitled to do what, because the jurisdictions overlap. And basically, it can also make a decision when asked to do. So any developer or non-developer can appeal to the technical committee saying, I don't know how to decide this technically, can you help me? The delegates, they have, as I said before, they have powers delegated to them by the project leader, and then they make decisions as they see fit. One trick here is that the Debian project leader cannot undo a decision by a delegate. He can only take away the delegates. But if a delegate took a decision with the power that was delegated by him by the project leader, then these powers are no longer in the hands of the project leader. They make decisions as they see fit, but they should attempt to respect technical sanity and or follow consensus opinion, which doesn't mean much, but it's basically a safeguard against delegates that might do crap. So the circle of power that we have is we have this constitution document. We have the secretary as guardian of that constitution. The secretary can also get help, so he can get assistance that will get part of his power too, but basically as the secretary office, he guards this constitution. And then we have this yearly election of a leader with full powers. Also, he represents the project, he can delegate, and he's also only one person that has the power to decide on monetary things, like buying things, sponsoring a conference, and stuff like that. De facto, it's also delegated, but it's full power. So he could, the project leader could come into office and revoke all delegations if he wanted to. And then the power goes from the leader to specialized teams. We have tens of them in terms of conference organization, Debian administrators, the account managers, lots of different teams that just make sure that the project leader doesn't decide on everything alone. But of course, then we have also the backpedaling in this power circle, because the developers can recall the leader. So with a vote, we could say, oh, we just voted for him a month ago, but now he is either gone or has only done crap, so we could vote to recall him. And we can also make or override any decision authorized by the powers of the project leader or a delegate. That means that as a body of developers, we can also say, oh, this decision was bad, so we call for a general vote, everyone will vote on that. That also means confirming or infirming whatever the delegates did. And that's why it doesn't happen often, but it's a possibility. Are there any questions so far on the different decision-making bodies?
The project leader is over the whole Debian project, or is it?
So the question was if the Debian project leader was across the whole project, or on what?
Or on specific parts of Debian.
Basically, we have only one level of developers, if you want. Okay. Like it would be Liip employees, for example. And they all elect one leader that covers the whole project for 1 year. And then you can have multiple terms. So basically, it's that. Other questions from remote? No, all fine. They don't hear anything. Okay. The second part is the Debian voting system. We use that for the Debian project leader election every year, for the general resolution, which is basically a way to take decisions, and it's also a procedure that is used by other decision-making bodies, like the technical committee uses the general resolution internally. So it also works at various scales. You can have 1,000 voters, or just 7, or just 3. Basically, the concepts are exactly the same. So that's how it works. Basically, anyone that has voting powers can propose a decision. Could be anything. within the power of the developers. And then he has to seek sponsors. For example, so you have to find K people. In the case of the Debian Constitution, it's 5 currently. So you have to find 5 other people that will support your proposition. If you don't find these 5, then it doesn't get to a vote. You can find 5 or 100, it doesn't change anything as long as you have 5. Then you can have amendments. That means that someone could say, oh, I like your proposition, but I would like to see this changed. So for any amendment, you also have to find 5 persons that would support this. There are various mechanisms to make sure that that the initial proposer can include them if they make sense or if they agree. Or if he doesn't agree, then it adds options on the ballot. And then, as soon as there are no more options on the ballot, there is a 2-week discussion period that happens on mailing list. It's a lot of mess, but it's an interesting discussion usually. Sometimes it's not at all discussed, but there is a time frame that is blocked for having a discussion across the project about one or multiple amendments that were on the ballot. And then there's a 2-week voting period during which every informed voter can file a vote, and then the results are announced. The specificity of this system is that you can have any number of options. Of course, it's quite complicated if you have more than 5, but it's possible. And there is a small barrier of entry for new options. Basically, if you find 5 people in a project of 1,000, you can add options that are put on vote as an individual vote or as options on a different vote. It's quite easy to get to a vote. For example, let's take an example. So John Doe proposes that we buy vanilla ice cream and announces that he seeks sponsors. Finds 5 people that say, we want to have vanilla ice cream. Then during the discussion, Tony Schöni says, oh, it would be better if we had strawberry ice cream instead. Also finds 5 sponsors. Now we have Alice that says, oh, I don't like milk, so I'd like strawberry but without milk as an option on the ballot. So if we assume they all found sponsors, here would be a possible ballot. So you have the vanilla ice cream, strawberry ice cream without milk, and further discussion. Further discussion is always added as an option on the ballot. That's maybe specific to Debian because we're never forced to take a decision. So there is always the possibility to say, I don't want to take that decision now, or I don't think that taking that decision is meaningful at that moment. And then when you have all the options on your ballot, the idea is that you can rank them by order of preference. For someone that would be milk intolerant, for example, he would say, my first preferred option would be strawberry ice cream without milk. And then I'd rather not buy any ice cream. So I vote 2. I vote further discussion as a second option. And then the rest I don't care. So I put the 2 at equal levels, which would be third choice. And then once everyone voted, you take the basically all options if they won against or against all other options. You can either see that as a graph, directed graph, or as a matrix. But basically, in that case, hypothetical, then we see that the winning option would be the without milk, but everyone agrees to have ice cream because all the options are above further discussion. But if strawberry ice cream without milk is not available, then the next option would be vanilla ice cream. The interesting thing of that is that it not only gives you an idea of the preferred option, it also gives you a weighting between the options. And if one of these options would be below further discussion, that also means that the majority of people that have voted, would prefer that we don't take a decision instead of that. So for further debates, it's also a much more interesting input than just having 4 votes of whether we want strawberry ice cream or not, etc., etc. So this is a relatively simple output for a vote, but you could have much more complex votes. And this was the one for the init coupling. That was one of the most discussed and longest votes that we ever had. But basically, That's a little math, but it uses the Condorcet method. It's an election method that elects the candidate that would win by majority rule in all pairings against the other candidates whenever one of the candidates has that property. And then on top of that, well, the idea is that it wins against all the other candidates. The idea of that is that it helps finding not necessarily the majority opinion, but the opinion that is least hated by everyone, something like that. It's kind of a way to encode consensus better than 50%, 51% just wins, and 49% are unhappy. There are plenty of examples in Wikipedia and stuff, but I'll let you go. The problem of that is that you might end up in a situation where you have three options that are preferred in circle. So A prefers B, the people that prefer B prefer C, and people that prefer C prefer A. So there needs to be a way to ensure there is always a winner. So there are various mathematical ways to reduce the number of options given the different votes. There are tens of different options to actually find a winner. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Basically, we should use whatever is out there, but just for you to know, there are various ways to find a winner. So Debian has two of these implementations that are almost the same, either in Perl, but there are also online voting services that we could either take in-house or you just use as services that allow you to file votes in different formats, and then you can also decide which resolving system you want to use. So there are various resources out there that make sure it's possible. As conclusions, there are lots of things in what Debian does that are cultural. For example, this just do it habit is something that we kind of have at Liip for everything that is technical. For one's own work, we never say you have to use this text editor or whatever. Basically, you do it as you see fit and you move on. And there's this strong empowerment in one's competence and responsibility areas. Basically, we don't have heavyweight decision-making procedures for everything that doesn't need to be discussed by more than one person. As long as it doesn't break, then you can basically decide. But if you do decide and break things, then as in Debian as well as in Liip, people will come back to you, say, you have taken this decision, it breaks things, so what's up? I think there are various things that Debian has that would be useful for Liip. One that is a constitution. I think if we drop management, that is currently the go-to for everything that we don't know how to decide, then having a constitution that defines how the power circulates and how decisions are taken would be useful. We also have delegations of decisional power. The delegations that the project leader emits have clear responsibilities. They clearly say they have power to decide on this. It's limited by that. And it's also revocable. So it's time limited or it's revocable by a further decision. And the last thing is this voting system, basically a formal way to decide on issues. So it clarifies how you can call for a decision, how you can add options to the decision set. And as soon when you have the results, it also helps seeing how the opinions were spread in the decision body. If people preferred things and how they ranked the various things. I didn't say it before, but for elections, the votes are private. But for all other decisions, all votes are public. So basically, you can also see who was in which set. It doesn't need to be like that. It could be secret at Liip 2, for example, but that's just a point. So some questions. Should we adopt a constitution? I think absolutely. It doesn't need to be heavyweight or decide on everything. It could be minimal. But I think if we drop management, then it would make sense to agree on how power circulates, how we want to decide on different things. Should we vote all the time? Absolutely not. In Debian, usually we have one vote that is mandatory, that is the DPL election every year, and at most 1 or 2 other votes per year, because it's a heavyweight, it lasts quite some time, and it's intense in terms of reading mails, building your own opinion, etc. And it's also not much needed because most of the things are already working fine, so we don't have to appeal to everyone's voting all the time. But having appeal mechanisms clear, to know, for everyone to know, if I dislike a decision, what are my ways out, or how can I get the whole project's opinion on this, is important, even if you don't use it. Are you proposing that we elect a leader? Not necessarily, but I think, again, if we define how power, so delegation, revocation, how that power is spread, also matters. It could be one leader that is elected for months or a year, but it doesn't need to be. It should be clear how we do it, I think. But this would not be self-organization anymore, right? Well, self-organization doesn't imply that we have no mechanisms. And I think if we are to vote on it or to decide on a constitution, it also has to keep this self-organization question in mind and not encode too many things, to engrave too many things in stone. But it makes sense to structure a little how we want to collectively take decisions. We're spread across 4 offices, 2 or 3 different languages, we have different interests, etc. So it's not at all easy to take decisions across this spectrum without having explicit ways to do it. Are there questions? That I'm concerned I'm done. Je sais pas si le micro fonctionne.
How do you know that something is important? Or do you, when do you go from just do it to do it?
So in Debian, by default, everything is public, either on mailing lists or on bug reports or on versioning systems. So not everyone is informed of everything, but you can find it. So, and usually when a controversial decision is taken, you hear from it quite fast, but then you can always find it on a mailing list. And there is no delay for like a referendum delay. So basically you can undo a decision that was done 2 years ago. But yeah. Ça répond à la question? Well, and then there's this, I don't know if it's tradition or procedure, but usually when teams take decisions that are important, they communicate widely to the devil announce or things that are read by everyone. That could be tech.
Something I've seen a lot in kind of very democratic organizations like this is those feelings get hurt when we're discussing. Lots of people do. That's an issue with this discussion. People have a lot of slack for something. Do you have any idea how that could be fixed?
Well, it could be reduced by people acting civilly. For one thing, I think Debian is known for having had lots of problems in that area by people just being assholes on the list and hurting people's feelings just on purpose, and that should not happen. Then I think what happens often is that there is a discussion within the 15 or 20% of the people that are vocal, and in the end, 80% vote. So there are 60% of the people that have an opinion, maybe read what is said but never interact, and it's fine. So yeah, it's very hard. I think within Liip it's also it would be also different because we're employees, so we are also bound to certain levels of civility between each other and on whatever the company's structures are. So I think it's not as much as risky as it could be an anonymous mailing list, basically. But it's still a hard problem. Other questions from other offices? I don't know. Hmm?
Maybe just to recap, so the decision process takes at least.
No, well, yes. If I come back on he recapped the voting process by saying it would take at least 2 weeks. That's how it is currently, but that's really slow. What happens? So basically, what can happen is that the Debian project leader can change the discussion period and the voting period by 1 week. So it could last 6 or 2. But that's one of the powers of the Debian project leader, and etc. You can also revoke that, etc. But that's also typical of a project of which people are not employees, they're not full-time, they're across different time zones, so it wouldn't need to be that long for a corporation, I think. Any other questions? No? Lunch? Motte? Merci. Et qu'est-ce qu'il fait chaud?
Merci.
Merde.